Hello again. This is my fifth video entry into my cultural basket assignment for ITL 604. In this video, I will be submitting my fifth entry, my fifth artifact, which is religion or spirituality. So, growing up, as I mentioned before, I am of Cuban and Mexican descent. So, one might be led to believe that I was raised Roman Catholic, which isn't far from the truth. For all four of my grandparents are Roman Catholic. My father, although adopted Protestantism before I was born, and he is Christian, non-denominational. He he raised my siblings and I. My mother included raised us Protestants, although Catholicism and Christianity both played a very large part in my upbringing. But to fast forward just a bit, I ended up adopting a religious tradition outside of my family's. I had a large interest in studying religions growing up. My father, as I mentioned, doesn't follow a specific denomination, but we did have Protestant friends and family that were of certain denominational traditions. And of course, my grandparents remained Roman Catholic, as did a number of my aunts and uncles, cousins. So Roman Catholicism and Christianity definitely had a large role in mine and my siblings' upbringing. But as I mentioned, I continued wanting to learn about other religious traditions, and I studied many Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism within the Eastern traditions, Islam, Judaism, animism, also Baha'ism, different sects within many of those religious traditions. So I had a myriad of traditions to choose from, but the one that always continued to pique my interest was Islam. I had a heart transplant at 2 years old. I found out at 6 that my heart donor was Egyptian American. When I met his grandmother, I found out that he was Muslim, and I wanted to learn more about his tradition because he's the reason why I'm alive, and I wanted to, in some respects, carry on a part of him, since he's no longer alive. He's no longer with his family. He no longer is a part of his cultural group. He passed, and I received the gift of life through him. So I began studying Islam, and I eventually converted. I was a devout Muslim for a very long time, and it for quite a while I identified heavily as being both Hispanic. Every aspect of my identity was incorporated into my worldview, and then Islam. I was also Muslim. That was a part of who I was as a person. So, I believe religion has a definite impact on how people see the world. And as a future educator, as a future inspired teacher, I know that it's important to be mindful of how connected people are to their spirituality. I've had children in my classroom, third graders, ask questions about God that, of course, we're not allowed to answer because we have to be objective and removed from certain certain ideologies, certain traditions. We have to be removed and not have any any intentional or inadvertent influence on anyone in any shape or form. And that's the way that I go about um, interacting with people of other religious traditions, especially in the classroom. But the point being, apart from that, I also know that it's important to, when interacting with both students and parents. I've had parents that have wanted to talk to me about religion, and I go, I I love hearing about certain principles and ideas, but that's not something that we're able to um, take into consideration, because we have to be objective. Everybody has a difference of opinion, and like going back to my identity. Although I was raised within a certain tradition, I converted to another. Um, right now, at this venture in my life, I don't consider myself religious by any means. I have certain philosophical viewpoints that are very much at um, at odds with uh, both the tradition that I was raised in and the tradition that I adopted. I don't identify with any religion at all, and I would imagine that the word agnostic or atheist could be thrown around. And if I were to identify with something, it would be categorized within that group. And I do feel that makes up who I am as a person now. As like any belief system does have a bearing on a person's identity, which it has for me. So that is why I've chosen spirituality and religion, or lack thereof, as my final cultural artifact, because it definitely has one of the greatest impacts on any given individual, myself included. For a long time, very Muslim. At some, like, in another period of my life, very Christian or Christian Roman Catholic hybrid, and right now, nothing at all. But nothing is always something, and that something is definitely a large part of my identity. And I think it's very important, looking back at this cultural basket assignment, being able to realize how many things influence my worldview and how I interact with other people. From the very first video talking about being a Spanish speaker, I definitely would agree that I interact a little bit differently with Spanish-speaking individuals as I do with Arabic-speaking individuals. It elicits a very different emotion, because I have certain connections to that, and it makes up my identity. And then going to food, and to family, and to place, and now to ideology, spirituality, whatever you want to label it as, it all has a very definite impact on who we are as individuals and who I am as a person, and how I will conduct myself and self-assess moving forward as an inspired teacher. And I'm really happy with the results of this assignment, and In closing, I think that all people would benefit from taking a moment to have an introspective look at who they are as individuals and how it shapes their lives and their interactions with other people. And um, in summation, I think that it would make us a lot more cooperative, collaborative, peaceful individuals. And I'm very happy that I had the chance to share my cultural identity with you. And I hope that if this class comes up again, I would love to see what's changed. As I would recommend any one of my fellow students to do. See how our cultural outlook, how we identify um, introspectively, how we self-identify changes over time. I know it has for me, and this video's made me definitely um, reach into the recess of my memory and see how I used to see myself and how I do now. And yes, this was my last installment. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed.